Hello, and welcome to our special series of Green Elephant interviews during March 2021, supporting the annual B Corps month. B corporations, or B Corps for short, are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. Throughout March, we are chatting with key people in companies which have chosen to certify as B Corps and become a force for good. Today I've been joined by Geoff Manchester from Intrepid Travel. Intrepid Travel are a leader in ethical small group travel and have been operating since 1989. They provide adventure travel across 120 countries in 7 continents and have around thousands of trips, which makes them the largest travel B corporation. They've been a certified B corporation for 3 years, and I guess that means I've either just gone or just going through the recertification process. Geoff is director and co-founder at Intrepid. Welcome to the show, Geoff.
Thanks, great to be here to talk with you.
Great. And I did a bit of research before we came on, and I went to the Intrepid Travel homepage, and it was great to see the very first thing I saw was a coast path trek in Cornwall, which is where I live in the UK. So that was nice to see it was started local. So that was great. I guess can't start any conversation on travel at the moment without talking about COVID and the impact of that. And I'm guessing that it's had a significant impact on Intrepid.
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, when COVID hit, I think we had something like 14,000 people out on trips at the time, and we had to get them home. Yeah. So that was a huge impact at first. And look, we got most of those home reasonably quickly, but the last 1,000 took a bit longer, and then the last 100 took ages, and there was a few people who were, stranded in obscure places in Peru and various parts of the world to get them home, because by then flights were getting cancelled and just not non-existent. So that was the first stressful part. But then basically business stopped, and we've hardly done anything for the last 12 months other than run a few trips in Australia and UK and a couple of parts of Europe and North America. But instead of doing something like 5,000 departures each month, it's about 5. So it's just ridiculously small.
Yeah, and I guess like any business, that's a challenge to survive when you take that much of a hit to your revenue, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's most certain. And I guess we've survived, and we know we can survive for quite a bit longer because one, we don't take all our profits out of the company. We leave money in the company for security because we've been through other disastrous times before, and we know you've got to have cash backing you up. And the other thing is that we don't use our customers' money until they depart, whereas a lot of travel businesses get the money in from a customer and will spend it even though that customer may not be travelling for 12 months. So that money is all there, and most of our customers haven't wanted their money back. Most of them are happy to just get a voucher for travel in the future. But those who really need their money back, we've got it there to give it back to them.
Sure. I mean, that sounds great, because there's been several travel companies in the UK I know have folded because what you say, they haven't kept anything in reserve, and they spent the customers' money before the customers have kind of needed to use it, really. What do you see as the future? What's the next 12, 24, 5 years of the travel industry? Because I'm guessing it's going to be quite different to pre-COVID, really.
It's really hard to predict what it's going to be like. We're hoping that things will start moving late this year, if not certainly early in 22, and it's looking like that should be able to happen. But we're very confident for the future. We're changing our business to focus a lot more on local travels. We call it domestic travel in our main market. So most of our customers come from Australia, the UK, and North America, but we don't actually take many people traveling within those countries. So we're ramping that up because we think people will continue to want to travel in their countries.
Yep.
So we're researching, releasing lots of product in our what we call local markets,
Yep.
Which is exciting because it's really good to be doing trips in your home country.
Yeah.
But we know people are just hanging out to start travelling again. And so we are confident that when the virus gets under control and people have had their vaccinations, they'll be out there ready to go. And so over the next 5 years, we expect to grow quite strongly as a company.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just on a personal point of view, as I was looking through the website and looking at the available trips, the itchy feet and the wanderlust was certainly settling in, and I was thinking, oh, I'd love to go to these destinations, and
Yes.
some of the trips just looked amazing. I guess travel, flying in particular, doesn't have, overtly that greater, if you're an environmentalist, you might say, well, why are you flying at all? You shouldn't be getting on planes. Is there any such thing as, ethical travel when it comes to moving international? What's your view on that?
Look, I think we all have a responsibility to reduce the amount we do, and rather than doing maybe 3 or 4 overseas trips each year, maybe reducing that to just one, but making it a longer trip. And I think our customers are really seeing that and thinking about the impact of their travel. And so wanting to do fewer longer trips, but also wanting to immerse themselves into the things that they do when they go traveling. So perhaps not covering as much territory, but the places you go to, seeing them a bit more in depth. And I guess that's what we've always done. And so we're in a good position to cater for people who want to do that more and more.
So it's about maximizing the travel, and it's not about no impact, it's about reduced impact of travel.
Reduced impact of travel, and especially reduced impact of your carbon consumption. And we're putting a huge effort into analysing what we do and looking at how we can reduce our carbon consumption. And other than the flying, the actual trips themselves aren't terribly high users of carbon. But we've been taking steps like to minimise the trips we have internally. The flights we have internally within trips over the years. And so, but that might mean doing longer train trips or bus trips or something like that. But I think people are now accepting that that's what they need to do during their travels.
Yeah. And I guess what's your view on the because we're talking very much about personal vacation style trips as opposed to business flying, and I don't know the split percentages, but my impression is that the vast majority of travel and flying is down to business trips, and the domestic or the personal vacation segment is much smaller, and therefore if we can all go on Zoom like we are now and work virtually, that's the biggest impact, rather than doing something different necessarily with vacations.
Yeah, well, that will be a big impact. I'm not sure what the comparative numbers are between business and leisure travel, but the business travel is really important for income for the airlines, because business travelers traveling business class a lot more and probably pay full fare economy class, whereas holiday makers try and get the best value deal they can.
Absolutely.
So that might mean that there'll be less choice of flights and less regular flights to a lot of areas, because the airlines, they're bleeding money and they're going to be in a recovery mode for a long time. So they'll probably be more focused on being profitable than winning market share, I expect. So the number of flights they'll have will probably be significantly reduced.
Yeah. Now, I noticed that you go to some really interesting places. A lot of travel companies will go to the standard tourist hotspots wherever they are, whether it's Bali in Indonesia or the Mediterranean around Europe or whatever. But Intrepid, I noticed you go to Galapagos, Antarctica, into some quite unusual places. What's the reasoning for that? Is it purely consumer demand, or why have you chosen some of those more unusual destinations?
Look, I guess it comes from our history. Like when we created Intrepid, Daryl and I were both backpackers, and we travelled a lot in Asia and a lot across Africa as well. And we set up Intrepid to go to developing countries rather than developed countries. And that just continued on. And like we started off running trips in Asia, in Thailand. And when we started in Thailand, I was the Intrepid leader. And we expanded throughout Asia. And then it went into other parts of the world. And so our travels very much focused on experiences and learning about countries that you're visiting, and really wanting to take people to very different places from your standard mainstream tourism.
Yeah. And I noticed that the trips there to these places are about experiences, and some people may or may not agree with going to Antarctica or to the Galapagos, but I noticed that you were quite particular on the way people behave and the way they, what they do when they go to these sorts of places. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about the impact of travel on, somewhere like Antarctica?
Oh, look, absolutely. Like, from the very start, we've always been very much concerned about the impact of travel, and we developed a term over time of responsible travel. And we've always wanted to travel responsibly. And there's a whole lot of facets of what responsible travel is. But for us, it's things like traveling in a small group so that you're not impacting the place you're visiting too much. It's using public transport, which we do on our trips as much as possible. So you're using an infrastructure that is in a country rather than having an infrastructure brought in especially for you. Yeah. We stay in locally owned hotels rather than international hotels, so the money stays in the country that we're visiting. And we do a whole lot of activities with in small communities and with very small business people, so that they're really getting the benefit of tourism, because quite often the benefit a country receives from tourism, or the money a country receives, is leaked out from that country having to buy things just for tourists, or for profits being sent out to the owners of businesses. Yeah. Whereas if we're doing a homestay or a cooking class just with a local person, that has a lot more positive impact.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's really interesting. You're avoiding the kind of the factory process of holidays. It's not a cruise ship turning up on a tiny island and 3,000 people getting off and descending and
that's right,
doing whatever they do before they go away again. Completely different concept.
Yes.
We mentioned carbon briefly. I noticed that you do some offsetting. What's your view on offsetting, and how does it work for Intrepid?
So our view is that we're part of the problem, and so we've got to be part of the solution to carbon. And we first approached this as an issue way back in 2007, and we became carbon neutral in 2010. But the big thing wasn't just that our business as such became carbon neutral, as in our offices and things. We actually made our trips carbon neutral. And as I said earlier, look, our trips aren't terribly intensive for their consumption of carbon. Because if you go trekking in Nepal, you're just walking, you're not consuming carbon. But we did an assessment of how much carbon our trips consumed, and then we offset that. And so we've been doing that since 2010. It's not an opt-in or opt-out for our customer. It's just there as part of the trip, and it's included in the price of the trip. So it's just been like that for a long, long time. Now we've moved on so that we've now set science-based targets for our carbon and our goals for what we want to do with carbon. And we're also, from this year, we're now offsetting 125% of our carbon, because we just want to take more carbon out of the atmosphere. And especially as we're taking people to Antarctica, which you mentioned earlier, and that's a very significant place that's getting really impacted. So we double the offsets on the trip we sent to Antarctica.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's I mean, firstly, congratulations on doing it so early. I mean, we're getting organisations every week saying we're aiming to be carbon neutral, net zero, whatever, by 2030, 2040, and you're saying, well, we've already done that 10 years ago. So well done on that. But just because, so what you're saying is that, you know, it's not just your business operation that you're carbon neutral for, it's for every single booking and trip that's made via Intrepid. So all those travellers going on a trip via Intrepid, that's all carbon neutral as well.
That's right, yes.
Yeah,
For the
nice.
trip itself, I mean, we don't offset their flights because that's not our business, and we can't possibly do that. But you know, we do encourage people to offset their flights when they buy them, and we'd love to see the airlines doing more to reduce their carbon, because that's just such a huge one for the world, the airline industry.
Yeah. No, wow, so amazing. Do you get a certain sort of type of person that travels with you? Is a certain type of trip? Because obviously sorry, carry on.
I think the type of person is just someone who is open-minded and wants to explore the world and wants to learn. And so when you talk about a type of person, in terms of age group, we don't have a type of person. So, you know, the most common, I guess, is 25 to 45-year-old female. But we get families travelling with their children, and we get lots of people in their 50s and 60s and 70s even travelling with us. We get first-time travellers who really like that idea of having a group and a leader who are accompanying you and helping you along the way. But then we get really experienced travellers who've perhaps travelled in mainstream travel for years and years and years, and realise that there's more to travel and want to get more out of their travel, and they find us and realise that you know, you can learn much more about a country travelling in the Intrepid style.
Yeah. And so just building on that Intrepid style, what's, you know, describe one of your kind of most popular trips for us. What would that look like? You know, how long is it? What would people do? You know, what would that typical trip look like for you?
So a popular trip would be something like a 10-day to 2-week trip in Morocco. Okay. And we'd have a group, depending on group size, which might be 12 to 16. So average group size about 12 people. They will arrive in one of the cities in Morocco, perhaps Marrakesh, and they could be arriving from, well, theoretically, 12 different countries, but you're likely to have, depending on time of year, you might have 4 Brits, you might have 4 Australians, a couple of Germans, and people from more obscure places like South Africa or Israel or anywhere. And so they'll gather there, and they'll be met by the group leader, whose responsibility is to run the whole trip. And then the next day, they probably won't do much in that city, because we're not about cities, and people can do things in the cities the day before or stay on later. And so we'll head off, and we might go up into the Atlas Mountains and do some walking in the Atlas Mountains. We might go to beach areas, have a bit of time at the beach. We'll visit other small towns, and especially somewhere like Morocco, where the souks of the towns are so interesting. Along the way, in a lot of trips, we try and have a homestay, so go and stay with a local family and really experience what their lives are like. As I said earlier, perhaps doing a cooking class with the mother in the homestay. So a whole variety of activities, but also at the time you've got the leader who is a local, and they're talking about their country, their history, their politics, their religion, and people on our trips really want to suck that up, and they really want to learn as much as possible. And the leaders love talking, and they love being able to share their country, and just becoming proud that foreigners are interested in learning about the country.
Yeah, I'm one of your typical travellers. I'm sitting here listening to that trip to Morocco, and I'm really itchy feet. I'd love to go, and it sounds amazing. I mean, that sort of holiday sounds exactly the sort of thing that I would love to do, rather than the packaged beach deal that, you know, that just leaves me cold, and I would be bored within an hour of sitting on a beach somewhere in the Mediterranean, and it doesn't interest me.
But one of the things I think in reality is you go and sit on the beach and you don't necessarily forget about your work.
Yeah.
And whereas on one of our trips, like within 2 days, you think, oh, you feel like you've been traveling for weeks and you've forgotten totally about everything at home, and you're just immersed into the local culture, and that makes a great holiday.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just sounds amazing, and I could talk about destinations and trips and what to do for a long time. But our listeners also want to hear about B Corp. So, what was the reason that why did you become a B Corp?
Oh, look, I think when I learned about B Corp and we did a bit of research, we just identified with it immediately, and it reflected our ethos and our way of doing business. And really is closely aligned with what we're trying to be as a company, which is we've more recently defined, I guess, is being the best travel company for the world. And so that whole thing about contributing rather than just taking something away. And it reflects our dual goals that we have of wanting to be a growing and profitable company, but everything we do has to have purpose. And this whole purpose thing is becoming more and more important in business and in capitalism, really. Companies need to be profitable, but it's not a goal in itself. Businesses need something more than that, really, to ensure that they have long-term success. And having purpose in the business really contributes to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the more and more bodies, governments, regulatory bodies, industry bodies are calling for reporting of CSR or ESG or carbon or whatever metrics you want to call it. So, we're seeing it more and more, and I think everybody's going to have to do it at some point. And the purpose thing, I think, there's been lots of surveys that have shown that organizations with purpose, particularly B Corps, perform better than organizations that are just purely, for profit and don't really have that underlying driver. So that's really. And what do you think? Do you think it gives any value to your customers? Do you think there's the customers see any value in it?
Look, the customers are beginning to. I mean, that certainly wasn't one of the driving reasons, because the B Corp logo and certification isn't well known. But the customers, when they learn about it from travelling with us, they certainly appreciate it. Where it's much more important is for our people. And when we first started talking about B Corp, our people identified with it immediately and just took it on with great enthusiasm, and we're really, really excited when we became a B Corp. So it's great for the engagement of the people within a business. But it's also really important now for attracting people to the business. And at times it is really hard to get the best people in a business. And over time, being a B Corp is certainly going to help for people wanting to work for particular businesses.
So they were all delighted to become a B Corp. How did you find the initial certification process? Was it straightforward for you? Did you have a lot of work to do? How did you find the initial process?
The process itself is great. I mean, B Corp, B Lab have done a great job of creating the process, but it was long and challenging for us. And I guess a couple of reasons for that. One, it was challenging because we are a for-profit business, and so we're not a business that was created for particularly to have impact as a social enterprise. It means we don't get much benefit for the impact that we have, and so that meant we had to change other things within the business. So that took a while. The other thing that made it challenging for us is that our business is vertically integrated and different from most other travel companies. And so as well as while we're based in Australia, we have sales and marketing companies in the UK, in Germany, in North America as well. So those companies needed to do the assessment as well. But in addition to that, when you go on an Intrepid trip, if you go on a trip to India, the trip is actually run by us. as distinct from most travel businesses. If you go on a trip to India, a local business runs it. And so we had at the time 19 of these businesses around the world which ran the tours in 19 different countries. And so each of those had to do the assessment. So when we did the assessment, we actually did it 23 times, not once.
Wow.
What's more, the assessment isn't the same for every business.
No.
So the assessment varies on the size of the business, and it varies if you're in a developed or a developing economy. And so, yes, it wasn't a simple operation at all.
I think that's the most. I mean, we in this series of interviews, we've spoken to all sizes of business. From small 2-3 people to businesses with hundreds of or even thousands of employees, and I don't think any of them have had to go through 23 different assessments to get their certification. So that's that's an achievement in itself. I'm wondering if when you're doing the assessment, because you're not a social impact business, and so therefore you can't necessarily count that direct community impact where you're based. But I'm wondering, you talked about leaving money in the economy, and in the scenario in Morocco where you've got in a house and being shown how to cook by the people in the house, and there's an impact there, and are you able to count those kind of things, and if you are able to count them, how do you count them?
Well, that's right. Well, we weren't able to count them because I'll talk about it in a minute, but we measured impact in a different way.
Okay.
But measuring the impact of the benefit of our money going into developing economies would be fantastic to do, but very, very hard to do. It just, I don't know, you'd need a university to be able to properly do it. The way we measured impact was benefit to our travellers. And that was in a number of ways. It was partly educational, it was partly health and fitness, and it was partly cultural and environmental. And so we were able to look at our trips and make a reasonable assessment of the percentage of those trips that contribute to those areas, and therefore apply for some benefit for the impact area of the assessment.
And so again, a challenging calculation, more challenging than most. So coming up, have you just been through recertification, or are you just about to do it?
We're just about to do it. In fact, earlier today I was on a meeting with our team, and it's well underway, and we have to have it finished by August. And we're now up to about 30 companies around the world, but we won't have to do it that many times, because I think B Corp have been really good at addressing the issues for multinational companies, because while we were one of the first, there's quite a few multinationals. And so what they're enabling us to do is pool several of the companies within a region together, and for them to do one assessment. So hopefully we might be doing 8 or 10 assessments, something like that this time, which will make it a bit easier. And I think the assessment's probably a bit more streamlined now as well. So I think being our second time, well, it will be easy, but there'll still be some challenges, because we've had huge reduction in our staff, in our workforce. We're not necessarily doing we're not doing training like we usually do, because people haven't been in our offices, and they're working for just hours. So there's going to be a few challenges there for things that we haven't been doing that we would normally be doing.
Yeah, and you hoping to improve your score? Have you targeted certain areas for improvement? And what's your view on that?
So we have got, we've got a sort of a base assessment of where we're at, and we know the sorts of things we have to be doing to make sure that we get there. For sure.
Good. Okay, great. Well done on that. I mean, that's just a mind-boggling. It's challenging for most organisations to do one, let alone the numbers that you're dealing with. Great. Geoff, we're asking all our guests for a tip or a recommendation of something that listeners can take away and do. Is there something that you'd like to recommend or suggest for guests? for listeners,
Yes,
rather?
yeah, there is actually. So we haven't talked about it, but through Intrepid, we have the Intrepid Foundation, which is the
Okay.
fundraising arm of Intrepid. You probably saw about it on the
Mm.
website. But through the foundation and an organisation called Ecologi, Ecologi, Ecology or Ecologi.
I've heard of those. Yeah.
Oh, you've heard of them? So
Yeah.
we're enabling people to take direct action to offset their carbon. So Ecologi have a tree planting project in Kenya, just outside Nairobi, and it's being Australian is quite interesting because it's replacing what was a eucalypt plantation.
Okay.
And so, eucalypts, they're part of Australia, but they're pests in lots of parts of the world. And this was an area of, I think it was a wetland. And so that's getting re-established by planting trees.
Mm.
And so we have a plan where people can contribute different amounts depending on how much carbon they consume themselves. And like a basic plan is £4.70 per month to contribute. And with that, 12 trees are planted each for that month. But in addition to that, Intrepid plants 12 trees to match that.
Okay.
And so while there's debate in the carbon industry about whether tree planting is good or not,
sure.
For carbon offsetting, there's definitely debate there. But tree planting in itself is good because it has other benefits.
Yeah.
And so we're enabling people to, just for $4.70 a month to do that. And if you have a family or you drive a lot or you a regular flyer, there's options to increase that to a higher amount and getting more trees planted.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, Geoff. I mean, so obviously I was aware of the Ecologi, however you say it, service. But what you're saying is if you go via the Intrepid Foundation, that you then match what's being done via Ecologi.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, in which case we'll point everybody in your direction in future then, instead of that direction. I mean, that sounds amazing. So that one-for-one concept is, we see it in all sorts of areas across sustainability, and it's only to be admired. So we will find the links for that. We will give them. We'll put them on the show pages. So if listeners are interested, and it's a tiny amount, even if you're, want to persuade your business to do it or your company to do it, then it's a great thing to be doing. We also asked Jess for a book or a film recommendation. Is there anything you'd like to suggest our listeners read?
Well, I read a really interesting book just recently called Impact, and it's actually written by a Brit, a guy called Ronald Cohen, who's a British venture capitalist and chair of Social Finance UK. Do you know him?
Okay, no, not aware of the name.
So this book, Impact, and because Impact is so topical for B Corp, it's really interesting. And one of the things that really grabbed my attention, it talks about that 100 years ago, or even longer, when people started investing in businesses, the only thing that they were concerned about was profit.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. But then perhaps about 50 years ago, risk came into the equation. And you got that trade-off between profit and risk. And if something was very high risk, you'd expect to get a higher profit.
Yeah.
Now there's a third factor coming in, and that's impact.
Yeah.
And he makes this really great argument that profit, risk, impact will be what we look at in the future. And I found that really interesting because we're so much into impact ourselves. And he talks about social impact investing and impacting and green bonds and all sorts of things. And in the UK, that market is quite well developed, much more than in Australia.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an interesting way of achieving social outcomes that governments traditionally have perhaps been very poor at achieving. And through people investing in an outcome, just to give you an example, it might be something like assisting people coming out of prison to get work, so they don't commit more offences. And the government will say, if you can show that you're successful at that, we'll give you $1 million. so people invest in the bonds to achieve the outcome, and then the reward comes at the end, which is a very basic way of describing it. And so, yeah, I found this book really fascinating.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll certainly look that up. That sounds really interesting, and we'll find it. We'll link it up in the show notes, and that completely resonates with what I'm seeing. I spend time because we've got another product, another business which we're looking for investment for, and the numbers of places where impact investing, sustainable investing, impact venture capital is now available, and the requirements are different. You're correct. It is. They want a return on their investment, but they are also looking for a definable, measurable impact, and you can't get into these investment funds unless you have both. And so there are a growing group of investors who are saying, if you don't have an impact, we're not investing in you. However good your profit is, we're not going to invest in you. So it's a really interesting and growing area. Geoff, if people want to look you up or find Intrepid Travel, what's the best way to find you? Is it to the website?
Look, the website for sure. Look, if people want to contact me personally, they can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I don't always check it, but yeah, reasonably regularly.
Okay.
But otherwise, yes, the Intrepid website and the Intrepid Foundation website are really great for finding out what we're about. And we have a fantastic blog on the website which has really interesting stories of the people behind Intrepid, especially a lot of our leaders around the world are really interesting people.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll make sure that those are linked up, and listeners go and have a look at the website, and try not to spend as much time on it as I did, looking at the fantastic adventures and trips that you could take. But yeah, it looks amazing. And if I was at a point when we're allowed to travel and we can book something, I'll certainly be looking at it, because it's as I say, the type of adventure and travel that I would love to do personally. So yeah, thanks for telling us about that, Geoff. It's now that time in the show where we play Fact or Fake, and I don't know if I'm pleased to say or not that Geoff has prepared some Fact or Fakes for me. So yeah, slightly trepidatious about how I'm going to do, but over to you, Geoff.
Okay, well, my first one, it's not very hard really, but have you heard, do you know what an echidna is? An Australian animal called an echidna?
Yep.
Yeah, so an echidna is, for people who don't know, it's a bit like a hedgehog, a small hedgehog. Yep. And they're very special animals because they're monotremes. They're one of two monotremes in the world, the echidna and the platypus. And they're unique animals because they lay eggs, but they suckle their young.
Yep.
And echidnas live on ants and small insects and things like that. And they dig up ants in the ground and things. And I've read recently about how much soil echidnas move each year in digging up their food. And so I wanted to tell me, is it true or false that an echidna, which is a tiny little animal, moves 7 tons of soil each year in foraging for food?
Oh, that's an unfeasible amount of earth. And the echidna's not big. I'm going to say that's a fake. I don't think they can move 7 tons. That's a huge amount.
No, it's true.
It is 7 tons. Wow.
It's almost one of the ones that's so ridiculous it's got to be true. But
yeah.
It is true, and actually they're really important for reoxygenating soil, and so it's just an amazing thing.
Yeah. Well done, the echidna.
Another one.
Okay.
I might have given you a hint on this one. Intrepid has been running tours in the UK for 10 years.
Okay. Have I got to say if that's a fact or a fake?
Yes.
10 years would be 2010. I think that's a fake. I think it's a little bit longer, isn't it?
Yes and no. It's a fake. You're right. It's a fake, but it's not longer.
Oh, it's shorter.
We've only run trips in the UK for 1 year. It's only 8 months since COVID came that we started running trips in the UK. And it's now part of our local range, and we've got 18 different itineraries, and we've got cycling and walking and family trips, to a variety of places like the Peak District, Lake District, Cornwall, your area, Wales, Scotland. So we're really excited about that being a new destination for us.
I mean, that looks like a sort of a fully mature travel service. I wouldn't. In 8 months, you've done remarkably well to get that set up in that length of time. Yeah, wow. And is there one more?
Oh, okay, one more. This is a bit of a trick one. Orphanages are for children with no parents.
All children have parents. It's just whether those parents want them or are around, or, well, I guess unless they're still alive, I guess. So the statement was orphanages are for children with no parents.
Yeah.
I think that's a fake. I think they're there for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, no, that's probably fair enough. And why I brought that up is because orphanage tourism has become quite a big business, and but it shouldn't exist, because in most orphanages in developing countries around the world, and especially places like Nepal and Kenya, orphanages aren't for orphan children. They're just for children who've been placed there, and most of them have parents, and they shouldn't be in there, because orphanages, while they're good as a last resort, they're actually not great for children. Orphanage tourism isn't something that our people should be supporting, and it needs to die out. And orphanages need to be only for children with no parents, or as a transition. It's a transition for people, for children to go back to families.
No, that's a great issue to raise. Not something you think of, is it? You think. You go to some of these more unusual travel destinations, and you might visit an orphanage, and you don't think of the kind of the knock-on impact of that travel. So that's amazing. Geoff, I do have 3 facts or fakes, which I've prepared, so I will test you with. So I think I lost that. That was 2-1 to you. And let's see if I'm any more successful with mine. And mine are all about sustainable travel. So my first one is 60% of people say they want to travel in a more sustainable way. Is that a fact, or is it a fake?
I would say that was a fact.
Okay, well, it's not. It's a fake. It's fortunately, good news is it's more. 87%, so nearly 90% of people say they want to travel in a more sustainable way. So that's really good news.
I probably should have known that it would be higher. Yes.
If you're a travel company, make it more sustainable, because that's what people want. The next one is a train from Berlin to Amsterdam emits 15 times less CO2 than flying the same route.
15 tons less.
15 times less.
Times less. Oh, yes, I would say that was true.
It is true. So if you can get a train, and as Geoff said earlier, a lot of their trips use public transport, then it's an awful lot better for reducing that CO2. And finally, 70% of global travelers are willing to pay more for holidays that demonstrate environmental responsibility. Is that a fact, or is that a fake?
I would say that was true as well.
Well, unfortunately not. Most people, so people say they want to be more sustainable. When it comes to where it counts in the pocket, only 53% are willing to pay more for sustainable or environmentally responsible holidays.
I'm surprised. I would have thought, more people would be willing to, whether they do it, would say they would be willing. Yeah.
So it's interesting. They want more sustainable travel, but not necessarily, they're not all prepared to pay for the more sustainable travel. So that was interesting findings from that survey. Geoff, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting. I've really loved hearing about Intrepid and all the things you're doing at all sorts of different stages of the travel, call it journey, but that the travel piece. It's really interesting, and I've learned things today. I'm sure the listeners will have done. And thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Great to talk with you.
We really hope that you found this special B Corp month episode both informative and entertaining. Make sure you don't miss any of the other 31 interviews with B corporations who are striving to be a force for good. So make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a thing. And don't forget to spread the word with others. If you have any questions about being or becoming a B Corp, or any comments and suggestions about the show, please do get in touch. You can email studio@greenelephant.show or visit our website greenelephant.show, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube or Twitter by searching for Green Elipod or The Green Elephant Show. You can also review the show on Google and Apple Podcasts. Join us tomorrow and we hope you have a sustainable day.